Alright, everybody, I think we're settling down. For those of you who weren't here when I spoke a few minutes ago, our third speaker, Shaman Ube, has not made it, which means we're not quite so pressed for time with the other three speakers. Our first speaker this morning, Christopher Rose. He's undertaking his PhD at Cranfield University in the United Kingdom at their Water Science Institute. His previous work has been in fecal sludge characterization and anaerobic digestion, and he's working with the Transforming Waste Consortium of UK universities, which is investigating high-rate anaerobic digestion in peri-urban areas of low-income countries. And he's going to be telling us about recovering ammonia and nitrogen in such numbers.
This developed the aim to come up with a simple way of recovering ammonia and nitrogen from anaerobic digestion effort and in turn create a high value products that we can use. So anaerobic digestion is sort of a decentralized form from the growing area with deep waters, for example. But this would create a byproduct of digestate that still requires further treatment. So dry beds are a popular way of treating this digestate. However, there are limitations to sludge dry beds. Much of the nitrogen is volatilized and lost in the atmosphere, or is lost in the percolate below the sludge dry bed. So this end product means that the sludge in the sludge dry bed is actually quite low in nitrogen. If we were to use it as a soil amendment, it's not really got much nitrogen there, and it's really just a sort of organic material. This led to the concept that we could try and combine sludge dry bed with ammonia recovery to be a real benefit. So most ammonia recovery technology generally require the dry-solid liquid separation of in order to get ammonia from things. But what we thought if we could use a media layer beneath the dry bed surface to absorb the ammonia, capture the ammonia, then we can use this media into high-value fertilizer. So that's the concept, and we set out in finding a media that could fit this purpose. We looked at firstly neonatilite, which is a naturally occurring zeolite. It's got high affinity for the ammonium ion, which is perfect, but also it's got great potential as a slow release fertilizer. The second medium we looked at was chart, or biochar. Again, it's fairly available in these sort of countries, perhaps a bit expensive, but also it's got very high porosity and a large surface area on the particles. And this is quite similar to sort of the activated carbon. And both of these are great for applying directly to land, so we can use the saturated product directly in the fertilizer. But as you can see, we did batch absorption, isotherm tests, and we were seeing that fertilizer is a clear winner in terms of its capacity for absorbing ammonia at these sort of ammonia concentrations. So I'm just going to focus now on fertilizer. But fertilizer has been used as an ion exchange media frequently in the literature for conventional sewage works in Europe, for example. However, generally it's used for treating fine effluent at polishing stage, not for treating waste that has such high concentrations of ammonia like we see in the RF. Not only this, but there's high concentrations of competing cations in the solution, which interfere with the ion exchange process. And this could cause reduction of capacity by 25%, which is the high organic load that's seen in anaerobic effluent actually increased the affinity for ammonia absorption by 40%. So that was quite early. This graph here, which I wanted to show you, just illustrates that, the benefits of using an octolite system in this. This is a graph which shows the influx of ammonia as it goes through a column. And as you can see, it's 99% removal at the bottom, and then gradually increases as it reaches right through and exhaustion when it's completely saturated. But what I wanted to show you, as it moves right, the curves move right, we're increasing the contact time between the sewage and the media. So as you see, if you increase the contact time, you get much more ammonia capture. And this is fantastic for sludge dry bed concept, in that we see very slow percolation rate of sludge dry beds anyway. The contact time up to sort of 5 to 6 hours at the see great ammonia absorption rates. However, that was with anaerobic liquor without the solids. We introduced the solids, you get volume as you'd expect. And this is largely in terms of volume. We set up some large scale columns with trickling anaerobic effluent through the columns. But what we're seeing is clogging of the media bed at the surface. And this results in actually quite low volumes of sludge percolating through the media. But we have a solution for this in terms of introducing the sand barrier at the top. And the idea of this sand barrier is to be sacrificial, so the sand barrier that we can remove as it gets clogged and preserve the media bed below. And this worked well, as most of the clogging was occurring at the top of the media bed. So the sand barrier, catch most of the solids here, scrape it off, we're still getting very removal and promising results. So just to conclude, and what the sort of proposals of new design, we're looking at a system that is quite flexible. It could be batch fed, it could be continuous fed in gradual trickle. And what we're saying is that you just need to load it at the point until the sand reaches the critical point of solid loading and no longer allows any percolation through the bed. So this is quite flexible and also we adapt to either area, and all you've got to do is measure the rate of the critical point where the sand no longer percolate anymore beneath the bed. And then after this, we simply just scrape off the sort of sludge thick cake at the top and then reapply and keep going in cycles like this. And it allows a much higher rate system than conventional dry beds if we fit into different areas. However, it's also great because it provides quite good flexibility in terms of you can make the bed deeper depending on the service times you want, so you can actually have this system that runs for years and years without changing the media bedding. So it's all about sort of changing and adapting to how you want it to suit your setup. So just to conclude finally, fertilizer has got great potential for this sort of modifying dry bed concept. It's got flexibility in terms of its operations, maintenance, and provides great benefits in terms of protection of the environment and so much perfect for these dry beds and generally just discharge the water anyway. And also at the end you're creating a product that is highly saturated with ammonia and it's a really high value fertilizer that can potentially be used. Thank you for your time and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Christopher. Thanks for keeping nicely to time. So it gives us time for a few questions. Anybody just put your hand up? Otherwise, just to kick off. You particularly looking at the nitrogen ammonia recovery. I don't suppose you did anything with phosphates or phosphorus, because presumably that's also recovered in the phenomena.
There will be a bit of it. Because it's done on ion exchange process, it's obviously not going to have the same affinity for the ammonia ion because they've got different charges. But there could be potential for having a different media beneath that to sort of the phosphorus.
But it would be, you could measure it in the end and see if it's coming through. If it's not coming through, then it's in there.
Yeah, I mean, we have done measures on the phosphate, and there is removal, but maybe that's quite well. It is likely to be used for capturing solids rather than any sort of capture onto the nocturnite. There will be some, obviously, but not to the great extent as we want. But there is also potential for introducing the
it's not really a question. Can you just go back to your first slide? Just don't see a section of your of the actual that's all I want to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Oliver Wright from Mantu. The binding of the nitrogen into the nocturnite, have you done any, how well adsorbed is it and bound onto the media? And to elute it or leach it out, what would you use? I'm not a chemical engineer, but how would you release it from that? If it's very well bound, how's it going to work as a fertilizer or a soil condition or something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can regenerate the media and strip the ammonia off it just by sodium solution. But this is not really the, because to do that you've got to have a lot of chemicals and it just adds another process. In terms of how well it naturally sort of releases the ammonia is a great question, and I think it requires quite long-term sort of hot trials and studies just to see whether that factor is the case, and that's definitely future work that would be needed.
Got time for a few more questions at the back.
There's a question also about regeneration, which I think you touched on at the end there. So the intention, if you put it at the bottom of the drying bed, would not be to regenerate in situ, and you more just fill it in and then probably replace the layer. The second part of my question is escaping from.
Yes, absolutely. We wouldn't be aiming to regenerate the media, just to use that purely as the agricultural amendment. There are better medias that we could use if we're thinking of regeneration, but penoptilite has a lot of advantages in terms of agricultural benefits as it is, so that's why it's selected as one of the medias. One of the reasons for not selecting char to move forward was the char's got quite a good ability to absorb, but it tends to hold on to much what it absorbs and it doesn't actually release that well. So that was another one of the big benefits of moving forward with penoptilite instead of the char.
Sorry, so the second part actually was, because you were talking about a lifetime of the bed, maybe a year or 2 years then before it would be exhausted. So that must mean quite a low application rate per volume of bed. Maybe something you can talk about afterwards, of how you get sort of contact between the bed and the fluid at such a low rate and the shape of the medium.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's there's a lot of adaptability in terms of the herd is much higher, depending on your land availability. You can run it as quite an intense system on a small plot of land, or you could run it as quite a large, less intensive. It would all be about size and the road it's working
question in front. This will be, take this question and one more, then you need to solve.
Okay, my question is still on the ion exchange. Potassium ion and ammonium ion was almost similar ion sizes, and clinical trials were almost the same feeling for potassium ion. So did you do any quantification of potassium in your slides?
Yeah, so we have been monitoring potassium. Were you asking about potassium in the incoming sludge?
Yes, because it is almost similar feeling for, I mean, similar size with ammonium ion. And that is the level was almost similar feeling for potassium ion as well. So that ion exchange reaction is very important for you to consider.
Yeah, I touched upon some of the impacts of competing cations about the reduction in capacity for ammonia. Potassium is important, and clear will capture potassium, the reason you say. We've done some work on the order in which the cations bind to the clear. Potassium is actually for ammonia, so it will generally capture more potassium than ammonia. But that's not a bad thing in our eyes. So we're generally not that high concentrations of potassium in anaerobic digestion effluents. There it is there, but we want to capture that as well. So I think all that's to the benefit.
Okay, thanks, Christopher. If there are more questions, we'll have a few minutes at the end. I'm sure many of you, like me, have learned a new word today. That's climactilolite. Never heard of that before. I'd be interested to know how available it is and cost and stuff like that. We can talk about that afterwards. Our second speaker is William Musazura. William Musazura did his BSc Honours in Agriculture at the University of Zimbabwe, and then he did further Honours in Horticultural Science at UKZN in Durban, or in Maritzburg, and he's currently doing a PhD in Crop Science at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. His major area of interest is wastewater use in agriculture through nutrient recovery.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is William Musazura from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. My major focus of study is trying to incorporate the agricultural component as part of the sanitation system. My research was entitled "The Effect of Irrigation with the Anaerobic Evaporator Effluent Discharge, Yield, Nutrient Uptake, and Leaching." Demographic studies have been characterized with high rates of urbanization, having about 70% of the population living in the towns and cities. This figure is expected to rise by 2030 and beyond, according to the studies. This is also imposing pressure on the local municipalities as they are trying to link the sanitation systems to the ever-increasing informal settlements. However, the decentralized wastewater treatment system has been proposed as one of the best alternatives that can provide on-site sanitation to the low-income communities in most of the developing countries. So the problem is now first with the disposal of effluent. How can we dispose the effluent? Should we dispose it into the water bodies, considering that it contains high nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus? And if disposing water bodies can lead to eutrophication, can we use it in agriculture? Its use in agriculture must also be sustainable. Won't it lead to other problems such as nutrient leaching? That's where I come involved, and my major objective of the study was now to investigate the effect of the anaerobic evaporator effluent on discharge yield, nitrogen and phosphorus uptake, as well as soil nitrogen and phosphorus leaching. My experiments were conducted at the Newlands Marshall in Durban, and this is the view of the experimental site. We got the decentralized wastewater. This is the DWAS plant at Newlands Marshall, and this is the agricultural field, and these are some of the nearby physical features, such as the river. My experiment was conducted as a single factor analysis with 3 boxes. Soil and chemical analysis were done before and after each experimental period. The IBR effluent which I used for my experiments were analyzed for physical and chemical properties, especially nitrogen, phosphorus. My experimental trials were the barrier effluent irrigation without fertilizer, tap water irrigation. My experimental treatment included a beer irrigation, tap water irrigation with fertilizer, and one of the treatments was left under rainfed conditions. A simulated the irrigation system using a 2-liter bottle was set up as follows, and this shows the bottles inserted in the field. Moisture content was monitored using the neutron probe, and the parameters which were collected included yield and the leachate, as well as the planting material were taken for nutrient analysis. The leachates were collected within the 30 centimeter and the 50 centimeter depth from the waiting front detectors, especially during the heavy rainfall events. And the nitrates and phosphates were analyzed using the MEC spectrophotometer, which is this one. And also these were the leachates which were collected. The results which I obtained showed that the irrigation with a BR effluent was comparable to other agricultural practices, such as tap water irrigation with fly fertilizer. During the first season in summer 2012, there was no significant difference in fresh yield as well as the dry yield. However, significant differences were noticed during the winter season when the APR effluent irrigation at the highest fresh yield as compared to tap water and fertilizer as well as under rainfed conditions. And these results were also consistent, although the tap water irrigation was not significantly different to irrigation with APR effluent in terms of dry mass. This could probably be due to differences due to seasonal differences. These were my NNP leaching results. All the results from the leachates collected has shown that most of the nitrates and phosphates were concentrated within the 30 centimeter depth for all the treatments, and there were few which were obtained from the 50 centimeter difference, indication that there was no leaching of N and P. And also, the variations in the concentration of P from the different depths and as well as treatment were not significantly different across all the treatments, and indication that even the APR effluent irrigation is comparable to the leaching of phosphorus from the irrigation with APR effluent is comparable to other agricultural practices such as irrigation with tap water and fertilizer, as well as under rain conditions. And also, as with the season, across the season, the phosphate concentration were concentrated within the 30 centimeter depth as compared to the 50 centimeter depth, an indication that there was no even movement of, there was a negligible movement of phosphorus between the depths, and this is also expected considering that the phosphorus is a immobile, is very immobile, and also the soil type would have a contribution since the experiment was conducted in a clay soil type. So for my conclusion, I can conclude that every effluent increased Swiss yield as a source of water, especially during the winter season, and the leaching of N and P could not be attributed to irrigation with ABR effluent, since the result obtained has shown that the movement was also was comparable with other treatments. And also for the nutrient uptake, there was no significant difference in the N and P uptake across all the treatments, an indication that even the ABR effluent irrigation can also be compared to other conventional agricultural practices. However, these results were done over a small period of time, and they are so inconclusive. So we are still working on finding out how can we deal with the excess effluent, especially in summer when there are high rainfall, and also we are looking at what are the long-term impacts. We might have observed a negligible movement of negligible leaching of nutrients over a small period of time. So we are doing some modeling studies on investigating the long-term effects of irrigation with ABR effluent on N and P leaching. And also, we would also need to look at the other factors such as the land, the type of land required to irrigate specific crops, and also to see if the process, the feasibility in terms of land availability, and also how can this will form part of our modeling studies. I would like to convey my sincere gratitude to the West of KwaZulu-Natal Water Research Commission, EWS, and MODA. Thank you.
Okay, number of questions. Sally?
So if you're using the effluent from anaerobic digestion, you should have pretty good pathogen destruction during the anaerobic digestion, but not full pathogen destruction. So did you look at any potential for pathogen transfer to the Swiss chart?
According to the World Health Organization guidelines, there are specific ways of dealing with the highly contaminated wastewater, such as the irrigation. So that's why we chose the drip irrigation. That's because it imposes less contamination for the plants.
Right, back right corner.
Thank you. Anthony Kilbright. I work in Haiti, and I'm actually starting a similar experiment this year, so I hope to speak to you afterwards. I have a lot of questions for you. But just for now, can you just clarify, we're talking about effluent from the ABR, so this is before the effluent passes through the planted gravel filter, is that correct?
Yeah, just after the ABR.
Okay. Did you also do experiments with the effluent after the planted gravel filter?
That is my current work in progress. We have just incorporated the constructed the vertical wetlands, and are working on effluent after the treatment.
Okay, thank you. Final question. Why did you choose Swiss chard?
Swiss chard, I chose it based on several factors. It's one of the most common local vegetable, and secondly, is the vegetable that can be cooked and less susceptible to pathogen risks.
Question back row.
Yeah, thank you very much, William, for your presentation. The use of effluent for irrigation is been done. The issue is that what is the potential for scaling up this in the context where you work? How can you scale up this innovation? How many farmers can use it? Where can we have land available around treatment facilities to what is the extent of the potential use of this innovation? That's one. The second thing is it will have been good to see the quality characteristics of the effluent that you use to better understand the kind of the quality of the effluent that you use for irrigation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is part of my ongoing work. I'm trying to also investigate the management practices after irrigation with the effluent, to investigate the amount of effluent that can be required by specific soils, and also that will also give us a decision on the amount of the land that can be required. Because the land requirement, it varies with the soil type, especially in clay soils, you need maybe less effluent, and also this will be also be affected by certain factors such as the seasonal variations. So this is part of my current ongoing work. We are looking at it through crop modeling.
This is Alex Wolf from Border, Germany. One follow-up question on Andy's question. What are your expectations regarding the results when comparing ABR effluent and the gravel filter effluent?
On the gravel filter effluent. Okay, the gravel filter effluent, the only difference is the reduction in phosphorus, and our major aim here is to find a way of just disposing the wastewater in an environmental friendly way. So our preliminary studies were based on the APR effluent just because there was no the constructed wetlands were not yet established. So my expectation is that we are trying, once we are irrigating with the effluent from the constructed wetlands, the major aim now is water recovery, just because after it has undergone the constructed wetlands, it will lose some other nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus.
Okay, we've got last question there on the background.
Hi, William. My name is also William. I'm from Berkeley in California. I had a question for the leaching experiment you did. Do you not need to consider ammonium leaching as well, based on, like you only mentioned nitrate, so why not also ammonium?
I consider nitrate than ammonia just because nitrate is the most mobile molecule which leaches most, and also nitrate is one of the most dangerous molecule which can also have other health risks such as brain diseases. So nitrate is a major contaminant of concern.
Right, thank you, William. Time to move on. Thank you. Right, our last speaker is Sally Brown, who Question Time the other day introduced herself as Sludge Sally. She said it, not me. She's a research associate professor at the University of Washington in Seattle. She's a fellow in the Soil Science Society of America and was on the United States National Academy of Science Committee on Soil Science. And her work focuses on the beneficial use of what they call urban residuals. And one of her students was Linda Strunder, who, well, a past student, Linda, who introduced the conference beginning on Monday morning. So.
Sally introduced me to Sludge.
Oh my God.
Yes, she is.
And Linda can tell you that I taught her all about significant figures and not that much else. Anyway, I am your last speaker before lunch. And oh, is it? Why not? Is this not? No. Okay. Let's get somebody. Okay, is this better? Yeah. Okay. So I am your last speaker before lunch. And so you understand that my time here and then your food is a process, and there's a related process. My goal in this talk, and you also know that after you have a good hearty lunch, you very frequently have to visit the loo, and you get that part of the process. My goal with this presentation is to connect the stuff that comes out of the loo to the food that you eat for lunch, which is something that has only been talked about occasionally in this conference. And for me, that's the fundamental connection that needs to be made. And let's see if I can use this. Okay. This is a little more, we had in a session earlier this morning, there was a great illustration. This is a picture, not nearly as appetizing, but it gets to the point. When you're talking about human waste, you're talking about the liquid fraction and the solid fraction. The thing that's really important to realize for both is both have very high concentrations of water. And this can be a big issue in terms of energy recovery. It can be a big issue in terms of transport costs. This is something to consider. The other thing to consider is the nutrient content, and people have talked about that, primarily in terms of nitrogen and phosphorus. But one of the things about food that makes it a great fertilizer is that in addition to nitrogen and phosphorus, it has many other things that plants need. Anybody want to raise a hand and give me a list here at all? No, nobody. How about, okay, do plants need copper? Yes. Zinc? Yes. Sulfur? Yes. Boron? Yes. Calcium? Yes. Magnesium? The list goes on and on. And one of the benefits with using these types of waste materials as fertilizer is that you not only get the nutrients that are in large demand by the crops, but you also get the micronutrients that are very often, particularly in weathered tropical soils, which is where most of the issues with inadequate sanitation are. You get the micronutrients that can be very deficient in these soils. Okay, so you get your nutrients, but you also get your carbon. And you have to think about how to take this mix of water, carbon, and nutrients and get the most value out of this. Now, realize that the primary mission of this conference and of what we do is to protect public health. And so I'm not saying that raw sludge is fabulous and should be land applied. There's a reason that we're here talking about treatment. So 2 examples of treatment. One, Marcos knows this picture very well. It's his toilet. And this is a decentralized urine. It's a urine converting dry toilet that makes a dry product that can be composted. Soil in Haiti does a beautiful job with this. This is a picture of a centralized composting facility, a very low cost, both cases low cost systems to decrease pathogens to safe levels. So I got the pathogen issue. And everything I'm going to be talking about takes that assumption that we've taken care of pathogens, or we're using the material in a way to let the soil take care of the pathogens. Okay, so what is our value? The urine is so much liquid, so low carbon, it's pretty clear that the value is only in the nutrients. Okay? The feces, different deal. You have fertilizer value, and it's not dissimilar also carbon value. There's much more carbon. That carbon has potential value as a fuel. It has also value for soil. And I am a soil scientist with bells on, and this is the International Year of Soil. And soil is something that we tend to neglect, but has great value. And when you start to quantify the value of soil, and people are starting to do this, there was a paper published that said that 17% of the New Zealand gross domestic product was directly related to soil. Ecosystem services, most of which are directly related to soil, was valued as double the annual GDP. So when we talk about wastes and their use for soil, realize that we're talking about big bucks in a way here. Okay, let's talk about energy value. Energy used for these materials is great, kills pathogens, gets rid of the whole disposal, gets rid of the yuck factor. But if you do the balance, if you have solar drying, your dry material has about the same energy value as brown coal. That's not bad. And in places where you need energy, this is very often looked upon as a great answer. Realize, however, in our sources of energy that using this dry people material as a source of energy, it also is very rich in nitrogen. And when you burn this material, you can emit very high quantities of the nitrogen as nitrous oxide. And that, if you're doing a greenhouse gas balance, basically takes away a lot of the energy benefits. We have seen this. You need to burn this material at very high temperatures in order to avoid the N2O emissions, and then you get NOx emissions, which are very bad pollutants. Now, without solar drying, you're talking about material that's 75% water. I don't know how ubiquitous Boy Scouts are across the globe, but has anyone tried to start a fire with wet wood? It doesn't work very well. If you look at the energy balance, you need to get to about 40% solids in order to burn without excess energy addition. So anytime you talk about drying that is not solar drying, you're not talking about gaining energy, you're talking about using energy in the process. Okay. Now you know where I stand. Soil value. Realize when you're talking about these materials as soil amendment, if you want to look at a greenhouse gas perspective, and for me this is a really critical perspective to look at, that carbon that has fuel value is also the Viagra for soils. It's the part of soil that gives soil its tilt, gives soil its fertility, gives soil its productivity. And by adding the carbon back to the soil, in most cases our soils are very depleted in carbon. And to put some of that carbon back gives you greenhouse gas credits plus a whole lot of additional benefits. You also get credits for not using synthetic fertilizer. Each kilogram of nitrogen that you apply as urea from a synthetic fertilizer plant costs you 4 kilograms of CO2. For phosphorus, it's about 2 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of phosphorus. So if you add those numbers together, you can see that the energy or the greenhouse gas balance for land application is superior to what you get from combustion. Plus you get benefits. Here's another example. This is from a paper, by the way. I should point out that this is the garden at one of our local wastewater treatment plants in Seattle. I have all my pictures are grown in poop. So here we have biosolids compost that's being applied to a community garden. What would be the difference? Okay, say you don't want to burn the stuff. Say you want to protect public health by putting the stuff in a landfill. This is now being done extensively in China, which is where night soil became famous. Now, a high portion of the biosolids in China are being landfilled. Here you get fugitive emissions of methane and nitrous oxide. Look at that balance. Whoops. No? You know? Okay, help me here. Which way do I go? This way. Okay, I don't have a... Here I go. The nitrogen, the methane, the N2O. Here's what you get for energy. clearly you have a much better end use from a greenhouse gas perspective. Okay. The thing with using these materials for soils is you get a broad range of secondary benefits. And for those who are looking forward to lunch, realize it's much cheaper and more effective to grow food in soil than it is to grow food in office buildings or in hydroponic solutions. Soil is our living skin, soil is how we eat. And when we looked at long-term studies of land application of fecal material in the form of centralized biosolids, composts from food and yard waste, you get increases in soil water holding capacity, you get increases in soil nutrients, you get increases in soil microbial communities that make the soil less prone, or the plants less prone to disease, and you often get increased yields. This is a picture of a community garden plot. We're seeing more and more urban agriculture in the U.S. This is a 60-meter plot where they used a compost and were able to produce enough food for a family of 4 for a year. Not the meat, though people do have chickens, not necessarily all the starchy materials, but $4,000 US in food in a 60 square meter plot. Okay, so how do we best use these materials? What we're seeing and what I love now and I'm very excited about in the States is a resurgence of urban agriculture. People are starting to realize that growing their food is a wonderful thing. And when they use, this is the city of Tacoma, where all the biosolids from the wastewater plant are used by local residents. And a substantial number is used in the community garden program. But realize that what Tacoma looks like, with everybody having a single family house with a yard and a lot of open space and big sprawling suburbs, this is not what cities look like across the globe. But just coming from the airport to the center of Hanoi, you saw food being grown all around the perimeter of the city up to very close to the city limits. And you see this. And this is India, and you see there's green spaces in the city. There are places to grow in and near urban areas all across the world. And the other thing that's really important is, unlike the US, where people haven't grown food for generations, people across the globe moving to cities have a history of agriculture that's much more recent, and they understand that the potato grows underneath the soil, not on top of the soil. We laugh, but people in the US don't know this. Okay, so what are the benefits of using these materials locally for food production? Okay, one major benefit that holds across the globe is increased food security and economic security. Realize that with our population growing, we're going to get up to 7 billion, we have to feed all these people. Here is a fabulous way to grow food. Don't throw it away. Now, this is a pretty picture of kids in Tacoma that are not only the users in the sense that they use the sewer system, they're users in the sense that they use the community garden with the biosolid product. There have terms of, anybody recognize their hats? Kale, which is a very good for you green. Something tells me that these kids are using it as costumes and that they don't want to eat this stuff, because you have to be very dedicated to like to eat kale. Anybody here has eaten kale? See, you're good. Okay, so when you have a potential to grow food, you have access to food, you have better diets, you can also grow and sell food as a source of income. That's urban ag. This is a limited example. Let's take it outside the city. This is data from a long-term study. Biosolids were used to grow wheat, a very critical staple. It was grown in an area where no irrigation. It was grown in a good soil. 4 applications over the course of 16 years, low application rates. And what you can see is we've increased soil carbon by 48%. We've increased the nitrogen, and we've also increased the ability of the soil to hold on to water. soil. This is a rich agricultural soil in an area that's not overly weathered. What happened here is it's dry land, and we think because the soil was able to hold more water, we started seeing increased yields over conventional fertilizer over time. You can see guess here which is your plus biotolerance. I guess you can figure that out. But if you look in the last 3 yields here, you will see this is the synthetic fertilizer. In 2 of the 3 yields, all of the treatments that had the biosolids had higher yields than synthetic fertilizer. If you don't have access to fertilizer, you're making a comparison between this, and it's much more pronounced. Now, what does that mean? It means increased food security, but look at the difference on an economic basis. The farmers here are seeing a revenue increase compared to the synthetic fertilizer of $1,500 per hectare compared to $1,200. This could be very, very significant. Okay. Finally, another benefit, we talked about public health. In many areas, many urban areas, soils are highly contaminated. You've seen papers published about lead uptake in garden vegetables in Africa. You've seen concerns about soil contamination in China. Any place where leaded gas or leaded paints were used in urban areas, you have high levels of contamination. So what else do you get in terms of a public health benefit besides food security? You get, when you use these materials on soils, you make the lead and any other metal in the soil less available. This is research here, and there's a number of papers published by this group, urban contaminated soils, adding biosolids products here and control, and what they saw was not only did the plants take up less lead, for the children that don't know that you're not supposed to eat dirt, you also saw a reduction in how much lead is absorbed in the child's system. So you get a win in terms of food security, you get a win in terms of climate change, and you get a win in terms of public health protection from contaminants. So, in my dream world, and this is a building near my house, and they have a vision of the future, I don't think that we'll see milk maids tossing grains to chickens in downtown Seattle. But for me, if you understand the incredible importance of soils and how wonderful these amendments can be for soils, you can see the vision of waste to soil for public health protection, to get improved soil tilth, soil health, and food security, economic security, and less even dangers from soil contamination. So for me, this is not a question. And now you can almost have one.
Thanks very much, Sunny. That's a great overview of such a big field. Questions? Who's okay? Ruth.
Sally, in your experience, fertilizer or soil improvement that's from human fecal sludge, how consistent do the characteristics tend to be? And I'm thinking in terms of comparing it to, say, organic fertilizer coming from chicken waste and the attractiveness of a product to a farmer buying it. Would they prefer to go for chicken waste because they know what they're getting?
So this is a huge issue, is the stigma associated with use of fecal material. So if you can compost the material so it doesn't look like poo anymore and it looks like a rich material, it's a really good way to get public acceptance. A lot of communication, what you want to do is get pride in what you're doing rather than flush and forget. The other thing to realize is these materials are comparable in their characteristics to animal manures. There are certain differences, and it depends on the animal, and it depends on where the animal is being fed and raised. So, for example, the animal manures will typically have much higher incidence of pathogens, and there have been very large numbers of documented cases of disease and mortality associated with use of animal wastes as opposed to treated human wastes. Certain cases, animal waste, such as chickens in the U.S., have 10 times higher arsenic concentrations. Does that get to you at all?
Just one very quick follow-up. I was wondering, particularly in terms of the nutrient ratios, the NPK ratio and also the micronutrient content, is it quite consistent in human waste, or is one back to another is going to be very different?
So my background is U.S. centralized systems, and it's very predictable there. Decentralized systems, fecal systems, it's going to be a much larger range, and this is something that you need to look at. But you're always going to have fairly high carbon content. The water content is going to vary. Your N is going to be low percent levels, and your P is going to be about half the N is what I would. And you're always going to get your micronutrients. And you can tell me if I get anything wrong.
Thank you very much. I can support your answer. Looking at the carbon in the thesis, they're competing against energy production, biogas, biodiesel, charcoal. Would you, then, if we take the carbon out of the soil, would we then outrage biogas, biofuel production? So this is more valuable to bring carbon back into the soil to produce energy, rather than using the sludge to produce some more energy.
So,
did everybody get a question?
So the question is whether, from a carbon and energy balance, you're better off to use the material directly to grow bioenergy crops rather than trying to extract energy from the material itself. So the model that I looked at, and it's in one of those papers, is anaerobic digestion with methane capture. And in that case, you have a fair amount of recalcitrant carbon left, and you conserve all your nutrients. So by doing anaerobic digestion, energy capture, conserving the nutrients, and then land application, that's a fabulous model, because you still end up with carbon in the soil. If you don't do that and end up destroying the nutrients, it tends to be a much better approach to use these materials to grow bioenergy crops, and we've actually done this. And depending on the crop you use or you grow, for example, if you grow oilseed crops, you can use the meal from those oilseeds as animal feed, so you get win-win all around.
I serve in the nutrition meeting. I'm a self-confessed failure. My question.
Do you like it in salad?
I do very nice soup. My question is about there's a lot of toxins in our environment right now, products that we use. And have you done any studies on how that's affecting the quality of the waste? Because it's a big issue now, because even some toxins in parts of the actually really toxic, and there's no way to take them out.
So there's been a lot of research. So we're very fortunate that even when we have industrial discharging into a centralized system, we have pre-treatment regulations that greatly can reduce the concentrations of contaminants. But then what's very much a concern is whether certain compounds that we use on a day-to-day basis, like birth control pills or soaps with scent that have antimicrobial additives, whether these can have a negative environmental impact, pharmaceuticals. And so there's a lot of research coming out. What you generally see is even in a case where you have something that's an antimicrobial agent, the benefits from adding the organic matter far outweigh the negative impacts. And most of the newer organic compounds of concern are degraded relatively quickly. So some in a few weeks, some in a year. In certain cases where certain pesticides and certain compounds that are more toxic have not been banned and enter the waste stream, the risk assessment process in the U.S. was done before many of these compounds were banned. And because you're adding organic matter, they tend to bind very tightly, and they are not taken up by plants. The study I showed with the lead, they were looking at contaminated sites, turning them into urban gardens, and they looked at PAH, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon contamination, and whether that would go into plants and whether it would hurt the people touching the soil. They did a dermal absorption study and found not a problem. So it's something definitely to look at, something to keep out of your material if you can, and then to evaluate and not just say no right away if it's effective.
Okay, everyone, I think it's time. Some of us might be wanting to get away. But could I ask the three speakers just to remain behind for 5 to 10 minutes, and those of you who've got burning questions, just come and find them here at the front. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy.